Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to chat with you guys a little bit about time under tension. Alright, this is one of these topics that you see a lot of people out there talk about almost exclusively from the bodybuilding world. And when you listen to real experts, coaches I know who either have PhDs in biomechanics, exercise science, MDs, things like that, when they hear this nonsense, they roll their eyes. And I know quite a few who have debunked it heavily, like my friend Dr. Alan Bacon. We're friends, we chat regularly. He's a coach, and he's written articles explaining why time under tension is completely meaningless, and even worrying about it can actually reduce your gains, that it's actual nonsense. And so it's kind of funny, people always say things like, well, if you don't try something, how do you know it doesn't work? Well, in this case, we have plenty of research showing that worrying about really slow eccentrics doesn't work. And here's the thing, when people talk about time under tension, they're almost exclusively talking about lifting slow. They're talking about lifting slow. And you'll get someone who says, well, I tried time under tension. It's like, what a silly thing. You just mean you lifted slow. You tried it, and they're like, and I made great results. Like, you might have just made great results because you were eating lots of protein and calories and you were lifting weights hard. How about that? It wasn't the fact that that variable did it. Because when we start looking at it, it falls apart. It becomes a problem. First of all, let's think in terms of the concentric rep and muscle activation. All right. Moving a weight slowly, intentionally on the concentric rep consistently gets less muscle activation, oftentimes less hypertrophy in studies when you look at it. And when we start looking at muscle activation, remember when they did the study a few years ago, and I covered this, to where they were trying to look at internal versus external cues. They were looking at muscle activity, and they'd used the bench press, and they focused on the pecs and the triceps. And when they had someone just do a normal rep, right, just a normal cadence with no thought as to what they were doing, just performing the rep, they took baselines of the pec and tricep activation. When the person focused on squeezing their chest harder, mind-muscle connection on the chest, the pecs got more activation. Okay? When they did the same thing with triceps, what happened? The triceps got more activation. When they focused on lifting the weight explosively using compensatory acceleration, both the pec and the tricep exceeded the normal rep and the mind-muscle connection reps, focusing on each individual muscle in terms of activation on the EMG. Lifting explosively, and we're talking about controlled explosively, we're not talking about flopping. And that's something I have to explain to people when it comes to speed work and stuff. Explosive is not flopping. Explosive is tight, and you move the bar really, really, really fast. Okay? Doesn't mean you flop or cheat. You are using the muscles to explode. We produce more muscle activation. So if you're moving it more slowly, again, lower rate of force production, you're going to get less muscle activation. There's no world where that creates more muscle mass. So on the concentric side, you're already at a disadvantage, right? We should be lifting relatively quick. We should be trying to move the weight quickly. Not saying everything needs to be dynamic work or compensatory acceleration, because at a certain point it doesn't matter so much in the volume itself. Okay, it doesn't matter as much. But it's a good idea to trend in that direction. Again, it's not something we have to use every single rep, every single set. But trending in that direction is good. However, eccentric reps, we have a lot more research on. Maximum hypertrophy on eccentric reps has been found when they're between 1 and 4 seconds. And I'm not saying, it's when you hear people say, oh, so I should try to go for 4 seconds. No. 4 seconds hasn't produced more hypertrophy than 1 second eccentrics. That range is where the most hypertrophy happens. If you drop below 1 second, which is basically not doing a concentric or not doing an eccentric rep, hypertrophy goes down if weights and reps are kept the same. I would also point out to people, though, great results can be gotten on concentric only if you just do more. Basically, you'll have to do more reps, and you should be able to do more reps. If it's a lift to where you have the ability to drop the eccentric, you should be able to get more reps with the same weight. That's the flaw in that study. What they have found, though, is that when the eccentric reps start getting past 4 seconds, what happens? Hypertrophy goes down. So here's our problem with worrying about time under tension. You're slowing the weight down. And here's the other part. A 4-second eccentric produces no more hypertrophy than a 1-second eccentric. So if you're doing a 10-rep set, you could literally add 30 seconds of time under tension by doing 4 seconds versus 1, and the hypertrophy is the same. Well, that 30 seconds of extra time under tension did nothing. Here's the other thing. Effective reps are what cause hypertrophy. So in other words, if you do 5 reps at 80% of your max, hypertrophy is very similar to doing 10 reps at 70% of your max. You got the same number of effective reps. The time under tension was longer on the 10-rep set, but the hypertrophy was identical. Hypertrophy was identical. Because mechanical tension was higher. Right? We had less total time, but we had a higher load. The end result, the hypertrophy, is very similar. So when you look at these facts, looking at things like rep range versus intensity, and yes, the exercise science term intensity is the amount of weight on the bar. Not the bodybuilder term. They're goofballs. They come up with weird shit and try to change terms all the time. It's like they consider conditioning to be low body fat. They're comical when you listen to these bodybuilders sometimes, the shit they come up with. They like to change language to mean whatever they want it to mean. They take pre-existing terms in the lifting and exercise science world and change them. But I digress back to the point. You have these 3 things to look at. We can look at studies on concentric speed, studies on eccentric speed, studies on rep range versus intensity. When we look at all this compared to hypertrophy, it clearly shows that caring about time under tension is completely irrelevant. And it's not to say that if you worry about time under tension that you're going to make less gains, but when you start really focusing on it, you will start doing stuff, chasing it, that will hurt your gains, like really, really slow eccentric reps. You're going to make less muscle growth unless you're blasting a bunch of stuff, right? But if you're a modest user or you're completely drug-free, you're hurting your progress. There's no benefit to any of this. It's based on nothing. It's based on nothing other than, hey, when I focused on this, it burned a little more. Okay? That's not how we determine if muscle growth occurs. Muscles care about tension, workload, effective reps, rest, recovery, food. It's not that complicated. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.